Alright, in this video, this is a dark sky API overview for any custom app, but I'm actually using Tasker as well to pull the information. And I will do a video in the future if you're interested on just using KLWP or some other custom app. But if I head over here to the developer console, and I know my key is right there blasted, but it'll be all right. I'm just going to reset it. I've started using this, 2 or 3 days ago, and yesterday, for example, I made a total of 17 calls. That's when I was working on it and getting everything set up. And today I've made 20 calls, and this is going to reset every day by using the free API from Dark Sky. Now, the Dark Sky documentation, I encourage you to read through the forecast requests, but I'm going to show you some quick tips inside of Tasker and how you can quickly get this stuff over to your custom app. Now, I have several pieces copied over here, and I want to show you how I'm using this inside of Kustom. So inside of KLWP, this is the Dark Sky Tasker component. You can find this from my free components folder. You can also find my Tasker project in my Tasker files folder. So I'm inside of that Dark Sky Tasker component. Nothing fancy here. I just want to show you how things work. And heading over to globals, guess what? There are none. We're getting everything from Tasker directly into KLWP. And one of my favorites, without a doubt, if you've been following my videos, very often I use the SI module index. And that's what I want to show you here yet again. I'm just going to come in here and delete everything except for this first text item that I have. And if I take this and I copy and I paste, I can get the next how many ever hours I can fit on my screen. Now, I have it set up in Tasker to get 12 hours worth, but it looks like somewhere around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is the maximum that I can get here. Let me go ahead and copy 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. And if I scroll down here to that 13th one and I go into that text item, we're not going to see the same stuff. And that's supposed to happen because I'm telling Tasker to only get the next 12 hours worth or 12 hours worth. So I'm just going to save that, go back to the home screen, and some things I want to point out throughout this tutorial are, for example, the first 2 times that you see in each little text item. One says 3 o'clock, the other one says 2:58. One says 4 o'clock, the next one says 4:02. Getting the epoch time from the API, for some reason when I convert that inside of Kustom, it shows this second time that you see in all of these. And sometimes it does match the actual hour it's supposed to be on, but sometimes it's a minute or 2 off, as you can see in a few of these in this layout here. Well, there's an easy fix. It's a weird fix, but we have to change the code just a little bit. I'll show that to you shortly. Then over here to the left, I just have a basic button to rerun that task, and I have it flashing Dark Sky updated. That's actually running the task inside of Tasker. Now, speaking of Tasker, here is the profile, the task, and these are the only 2 things that are in this Tasker project. So when you import this Dark Sky API project into Tasker, you're going to have this profile, and basically this profile is saying every 61 minutes, I want to run the task called get. Now, you could make this run more often. You'd have to go edit that. And that task it's going to run is get. Now, for this task, you're going to see a lot of things cut off, and we don't really need them. But, the ones over here with the bars, these are not going to run whenever I run this task. This was there for testing purposes, and as you open this up and mess around with it yourself, feel free to cut those back on. For example, if you cut this one on here, you just want to check and make sure you are getting your location. %LOC all capitalized, that should give you your longitude and latitude. And we do need that in the URL for the API. So again, any of these with the bar, these are cut off. Feel free to cut them back on and make sure you're getting the information that you need to be getting. Now, I'm using Auto Tools to get that JSON, and that JSON is going to be something like this. And I have not refreshed this recently, but whatever, it's fine. I'm pulling this information here and I'm letting the Auto Tools JSON read actually get these pieces of information very quickly, and then I'm just sending them all over to KLWP in a manner such that every single piece of data has its own individual variable. You'll see what I mean right here in a second. So Auto Tools JSON read, all I'm doing here inside of this one is I am setting up the URL and I'm pulling the entire JSON file. So I have it set to simple mode. The JSON right here, that's going to be the URL That's going to have the api.darksky.net/forecast/ your key and then /%lock. That's your location. That's the longitude and latitude that we need in the URL. And then the only other thing I'm doing here is I'm taking that JSON, that entire file, and I'm storing it as a local variable in my task, %darksky. Nothing else inside of there. As you can see, I'm pulling that URL, I'm saving it as a variable, dark sky, and that's the entire JSON object. So going back out of that, I did flash to make sure that local variable was getting stored and saved. And then what I'm doing is I'm actually creating a global variable inside of Tasker. Notice I have %darksky. As long as you use a capital letter, you will have a global variable that can be accessed from other tasks. Though we don't need that, let me show you the benefit. If I back out of here and go over to vars, I actually have that entire variable there. Just in case something was messed up, I could easily access all of that text information, copy and paste it into Microsoft Word or some text application to see what the outputs are and make sure everything matches up. This is not absolutely necessary by any means, but I am storing it as a global variable so I have access to it. So this action here that is cut off, I just flashed that new global variable, and now I'm going to take that global variable and I'm going to do another JSON read on it. Again, you don't have to do this global variable stuff, but I'm actually reading the global variable. So up here is where we actually make the call. That's where I'm using the URL. Everything after this, I'm not calling on that API anymore. I'm using the information inside of Tasker, that global variable, and we're going to break that JSON apart to get the information that we want. So this JSON read right here, we are getting a little bit more information in this one, and let me just go ahead and show you what I've done. First of all, cut simple mode off. That way we can access individual pieces within the JSON file. The JSON string, now I'm actually accessing that global variable, %darksky, notice my capital letters. The fields that I want to get. So I'm going to scroll on over here to the hourly section of this JSON object, and it's right here, hourly. .data, so hourly, then I'm going to my data section, .time. So I'm accessing this piece right here. And I can access, I forget how many hours there are. I think there's 48 individual sections like this within the JSON object, but I'm limiting it to 12, and I will show you that right here in a moment. But basically I'm pulling these times. And since there are a group of these that I'm pulling, you want to use parentheses at the end. That way you're telling it, hey, pull out a list of these numbers or a list of this data. So here's some other pieces of information I'm pulling. Notice I'm separating all of these with a comma, hourly.data.summary, and I'm also pulling a list of those. The summary, partly cloudy, clear. All right, what's the next one I'm pulling? Hourly.data.precip probability. I'm pulling a list because we have a precip probability for each one of these sections. And then hourly.data.temperature. As you can see, we do have a temperature for each one of these as well. And I tell you what I'm going to do. That's the only ones I'm pulling right now, but I'm going to show you that we can quickly just go ahead and get another one, change our task a little bit, and we can shoot this on over to KLWP and add it to that component. So let's do that right now. So I'm going to pull hourly.data.windspeed. It's going to grab the wind speed from a certain number of these groups within the hourly.data section of this JSON. Clicking OK on that. Coming down to filter, max results, I'm going to pull out a maximum of 12 pieces of data for each one of these lists. And again, I think there were 48 of them or something like that. Didn't change anything else inside of that menu. And then coming down to advanced, you may need to use a different separator. I'm using a separator, the default is a comma, and that's going to be fine because none of these pieces of data have commas inside of them. If you're going to pull a summary for this, not this summary here, but the summary for hourly.summary, sometimes there may be a comma somewhere in this sentence. But all of these pieces of data that we're pulling, there's not a comma, and I'm not talking about the comma at the end of each one of these. Don't worry about that comma. The actual pieces of data that we're getting, there's no comma within those pieces. So this comma as a separator is just fine for what we're doing. I'm going to back out of here, going to check on that, And now that we have added that new one here, the hourly.data.windspeed, we're going to have another list of JSON values, and they're going to be separated by commas. Backing out of here, and now down here at this flash, I went ahead and added another thing just to test percent hourly underscore data underscore wind speed. That's that hourly dot data dot wind speed, but it's automatically named with these underscores there. So just for testing purposes, I'm going to cut that flash that I've added, that new one, and I'm going to see if we get some wind speeds out of here. Let me back out of there. Let me hold down on that and cut it on. So here's what's going to happen. It's going to do the JSON read on the URL. It's going to save that local variable that we've created in the root variable as a global variable, and then we're going to read that global variable. Again, this is good for testing purposes. Let's go ahead and run this, and we should have a flash right here in a moment. Notice that right there, and it went away real quick, but those list of numbers there, those were wind speeds. Now that we have all this data, I'm going to cut that flash off. And now we're ready to send all this data over to KLWP. So this is maybe not the most efficient way of doing it, but I think this will make the most sense to you. And I'm setting a variable, and I'm calling it percent count, and I'm going to set it equal to 1. And then we're going to do a for loop right here. And what this for loop is going to do for this particular one, we have several of these for loops. We're going to grab the hour, this time piece right here, and we're going to send that over to KLWP. So this for loop, I'm creating a variable, I'm calling it percent time. And basically what's going to happen is we're going to have a list of times here. You know, these epoch times that you see here, there's going to be 12 of them because that's the maximum number of results I wanted for each list. Each one of those items inside of this list of numbers, we're going to give it the variable of percent time. And inside of this for loop, once we assign one of those numbers in that list to this variable, I'm actually going to send that over to KLWP, and here's how this configuration looks. So percent time, that's going to be one of those times in that list. And I'm giving it a custom variable name of H count. H, I just let it stand for hours, so hour 1. Because remember, percent count right now is 1. But notice this for loop here, the way I have this set up, once it sends over that H1, since percent count is 1, I'm going to actually add 1 to percent count. So now percent count becomes 2. And then what this for loop will automatically do is it's going to go back to the beginning of this for loop. And now it's going to take the second item in here. It's going to call it percent time, and it's going to send that percent time. That's the tasker variable. And now the custom variable is going to be called H2. Then it's going to take the percent count of 2, it's going to add 1 to it, so now it becomes 3. It's going to come back to here, grab the third item in the list, it's going to call it percent time, send it over to custom as H3, and this will continue to do it for all of the items in this list. That's what that for loop means. So for the items in this list, we're going to call each one of them percent time, and to make sure you understand this again, we do KLWP send variable. For each one of those percent times, the tasker string, we're going to give it H1, H2, H3, all the way up to H12. That's how that for loop handles that. And then once it goes through all 12 of those values, we end that for loop. So what we've just done here is we've sent over those variables for times, and we called them H1 through H12. We sent them over to KLWP. So check out the next one. Variable set. Now remember, percent count is 12 once it runs through this for loop, so I want to set percent count back to 1 again. And now I'm going to create another for loop, and this is going to be for the hourly .data.summary, but remember it's these underscores here. It's going to look through each one of these summaries. I'm going to call each one of those percent summary, and guess what? We're going to send this over to KLWP, very similar to the times. Each one of those percent summaries, we're going to call it S1, S2, S3, all the way up to S12. And if you scroll through these, basically I'm giving it some name. Now I'm looking at the percent probability, so I'm calling this pprob. And then when I send it over to KLWP, I'm calling it P1, P2, P3 inside of this for loop. All of these for loops are the same. So let me come down here and I'm going to highlight this, and this. So the last one that I've sent over in this task was the hourly data temperature. And over in custom, I'm calling it T1, T2, T3. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to come down to the end of my task and I'm going to paste it. So I've just copied that over. Variable set, I want to set it back to 1. And now let's create a new piece for our for loop. Since we talked about wind speed, I'm going to call this one %wind. And the variable that we got from the JSON read was wind speed. Backing out of there. Now I want to set my KLWP send variable. So inside of here, the tasker string is now going to be %wind, and I'm going to call it W. So this will be W1, W2, etc. as we loop through that for loop. And after that, we're going to keep on adding those variables in the for loop, and now we're going to flash dark sky updated. So what we should be able to do now is test this. Let me make sure I got the right ones on. I want to cut that one on, variable set, JSON read, and then all of these for loops with the % count to 1, refreshing that % count as we go to the next for loop. So let's give this a test run. And we have dark sky updated. I'm going to back out of here, check this, go back to the home screen. Now you'll notice some different times here, obviously, than what you saw just a few minutes ago. There was a big transition in time because I did have to leave the computer for several hours. But anyway, we're still getting the data. Let's go into custom. And inside of the component, let's go to the stack group. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all of them except for one of them. It doesn't matter which ones you delete, really, because the SI module index is controlling all of this. But I'm going to delete all of them so that we have just one left that we can easily edit. So here we go. Inside of this text item, first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is add that wind speed. So I'm just going to come to the end of my list here. I'm going to do a broadcast for tasker, comma, and now to get the wind speed, remember how we had a W and then it was % count? Well, this is going to change depending on which item we copy and paste inside of this stack group, and we can refer to that particular item as SI module index +1. And the reason why we need to do +1 for all of these is because technically the first item inside of custom has an index of 0, but recall our counts were count was 1, 2, 3, 4, so we don't want to start at 0. And we can concatenate this by putting a plus. Sometimes it is good practice to put quotations around this piece here because we actually literally want to put a W there. And then to access that SI module index, let's put that inside of its own little group of parentheses as well. And remember, we want to do +1. And the +1 again is that first item has an index of 0, but we actually want to give it a value of 1. So it's going to be 0 + 1, and then it'll fix itself as we go through the rest of these. So closing that up, we should have a wind speed now, but I can't quite see it. Let me just go ahead and check that. And we do have a wind speed. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to refresh this, and I'm going to come down to the hourly, and I'm just going to see what the wind speed is. 0.59. We do have a 0.59 right there. You probably can't see it, but it is working just fine. Checking out all these other numbers. Let's see what we got here. Clear, precipitation probability, 0, temperature is 62.41. Everything's working good. So this is our wind speed. Now let's come in here and talk about the time. Now this one right here, the DF, hours, minutes, AM, PM, and I'm broadcasting for tasker. I'm doing the H, remember that's our hourly, and then SI module index +1. All of these look the same if you look at the broadcast for tasker. However, sometimes when I do this, in this case here, look at this one, that's returning an 859. And a way that I fixed that, I'm just going to delete that out because I don't need it. But the way I fixed it is that I just did a math utilities round to actually get it to show 9 p.m. So if you look here, DF, hours, minutes, AM or PM, and then I'm doing an MU round on that hour time that I'm getting over from tasker. That's the only thing I had to do there, and when I did that, it returned, on the hour. It wasn't 9:01 or 8:59, it's showing 9 p.m. And now let me show you a few other things I did here. For the precipitation, broadcast, tasker, then I did the P, and then it's P1, P2, P3. But then I multiplied that by 100, since originally the precipitation probability, these are decimals. So if we multiply it by 100, throw a % onto the end of it, we can get an actual percentage from 0 to 100%. For the temperature, since this is in degrees Fahrenheit, maybe it would be a good idea to do an actual degree symbol. So I'm just going to throw that over from my Mac. And then I'm going to put an F there for degrees Fahrenheit. So 62.41 degrees Fahrenheit. Heck, maybe you want to round this to the nearest whole number. That's real quick. We can do an MU round, put a comma, and then put a extra parentheses here. So now we have 62 degrees Fahrenheit, rounding to the nearest whole number. And then maybe for the wind speed, we want miles per hour. So checking on that. And now if we back out of here to our text item, take this, copy it, paste it, and I could go all the way up to 12 like I showed you at the beginning, or whatever your maximum number of results were. Now obviously once you get these pieces of data, maybe you want to make a weather graph with it. I have plenty of tutorials on making weather graphs, and use this data however you want. This is just one way to access the Dark Sky API. Again, I'm using Tasker here, and the end goal here is this. Let me refresh this page. Yeah, my calls have gone up here, but I guess whatever time it resets, it's not midnight here. But by us doing this in Tasker, I mean, look, the 27th, it still is April 27th where I am, but I did 25 calls. I mean, I'm nowhere near 1,000 free calls per day. And by us setting this up in a profile in Tasker to run every 61 minutes or whatever, maybe you want to run it every 30 minutes, still, you're going to get nowhere near the 1,000 free call limit when using Tasker. Now actually in Kustom you shouldn't get close to that either, but I do find sometimes if you're messing around with the JSON file, doing the codes, and you start saving and reloading the preset, the call count can get high. But by us doing this in Tasker, we have total control over the number of calls we make. And there you have it, using Tasker and Auto Tools to access the Dark Sky API. If you're interested in a KLWP only tutorial on this, feel free to comment below. As well as if you have any questions, feel free to leave those below as well. And that's it for this video. I hope it helped.